Ever since I read The E-Myth by Michael Gerber almost 20 years ago now, I've been fascinated by this concept of creating a business that could be franchised, whether or not you actually choose to do that. The idea of building a business so systemized and so well documented that anybody could run it, that absolutely fascinates me, and it's been one of the driving things behind everything I do and how I now help my clients. And so when today's guest applied to be on the show, I was super excited about speaking with him. Amrit Dhaliwal is the CEO and founder of Walfinch, which is a UK-based home care for the elderly franchise. With a turnover of almost £20 million, he knows a thing or two about creating a successful franchise. We dug into the franchise model, into his culture and how that's influenced his business, into the change he's trying to make in the world, and why he believes the franchise model is helping him achieve that far more quickly and with far the greater impact than he could have ever done if he just had his own business, so to speak. If you're looking for inspiration, ideas about franchising, or just how to run a better business, this episode is definitely one to listen to. Enjoy. So the question is this: how do entrepreneurs like us who don't have an endless supply of cash, how do we leverage the best apps, virtual assistants, automation tools and systems to scale our businesses, increase our profits and have more time to do what we love to do each day? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answer. My name's Dr. Steve Day and this is Systemize Your Success. Hello and welcome to Systemize Your Success. As always, I'm Dr. Steve Day, and today I'm joined by Amrit Dhaliwal. He's the founder and CEO of Walfinch, which is a large UK-based home care franchise network. And established in 2019, he's now got 36 franchises, employs over 500 people, and is aiming for a £20 million turnover or revenue in the current financial year. So someone with massive amounts of experience in the franchising market, and someone I've been really excited to pick his brains about. So welcome to the show, Amrit. I'm really glad to have you on.
Great to be here, Steve. Thank you for the invitation.
Absolute pleasure. So I'd love to know a bit about Amrit in terms of why did you choose to dedicate your life to this? What were the challenges, problems, or what were the goals or ambitions or visions you have for starting this in the first place that's allowed you to keep on driving it to the size and success that you've had today?
It's a very nice question, Steve. Thank you. So, I went to university and read economics and history, came out at 21, and I thought, gosh, I have to now get a real job, which I never wanted to do. So I went off and started working as a headhunter. Did that for about 8 months and realized it just wasn't for me. Not the work per se, just the monotonousness of having the same job to do every day, day in, day out for the next 20, 30 years. I just couldn't comprehend living like that, basically. And so I went off and was able to get some funding together and bought this going concern, which was in Richmond, Surrey, as an Italian deli. And I had no idea what the hell I was doing, but gave it a bash anyway. Built that up a little bit and rebranded that, made that more of a fine dining Italian restaurant. Started another site in Richmond, which was a tea room, won some awards. But I was working like a maniac. It was madness. I was sort of running sort of 70, 80 hour weeks. It was quite intense. In the midst of all of this, I met my now wife, my then girlfriend, who's a dentist. Her family are from nursing home backgrounds and so on. And I was about 25 years old. We were having a coffee in our favorite coffee shop then in Buckinghamshire. And she says to me, Amrit, have you ever thought about domiciliary care? Maybe you should buy a franchise. And I was like, sorry, what the hell is domiciliary care? And the next thing I know, I've bought this franchise in home care, and I'm living in Buckinghamshire at the time. I live in London now, and I'm driving an hour up to Oxfordshire to do a 9 to 5 at this dom care business, 3 hours in rush hour to Richmond to work there until 12, 1 o'clock, an hour back to Buckinghamshire to spend an hour on the phone to my then girlfriend, keeping those wheels spinning, and did that for 18 months or so until I sold the restaurants and got into the home care alone. I signed the contract in 2012, but probably by April 2013, I had realized that this was the issue that I needed to fix. Home care and franchise franchising in the UK within the home care space were broken. And I needed to, invest the next 20 years of my life fixing that, rebranding it, and redefining home care franchising. And so I built that business up to over 1 million in revenue, profitably sold it, and used that as a treasure chest to then go off and start my own home care franchising operation and have just collected the right people and carried on building.
Very cool. And do you have any, is there a personal reason why you've dedicated yourself to healthcare and specifics? Is there family people that are in care or anything like that that's inspired you?
Yeah, it's interesting, really. I think often the people that are in healthcare, because you can earn a crust anywhere, and it's pretty damn hard in healthcare, as you know. But I think people that are involved in healthcare or home care, social care,
Yeah.
invariably have a little bit more. And I'm Punjabi, so families from like North India. My parents were immigrants to this country, and were accidental entrepreneurs, and we have this concept called seva. And what that means is service to others, and it's part of our culture and so on. So, I was very much brought up in, serving older people, making sure that they were okay, and serving others around us. So, but interesting, when I was looking at this sector for the very first time, my grandfather had come over from, village India and spent about 18 months with us or so. And at that point, I realized that actually this is really hard. Providing care, which we were providing for him, was really tough. I mean, he was an 85-year-old Indian male who had never left his village. And so he didn't want anyone else supporting him. And it was basically left to me and my dad because he didn't want any, females, and felt very uncomfortable by that whole thing. And and I saw up close the problem that was there, and I thought, well, the reason that's there is because we're not aware of what else we can do here, and if we were, then would it cater to this particular market and so on, and so that really helped kind of shape my thinking at the time, and moving forward from there. Actually, the other part of it was that I really feel that when I started my businesses, all of them, I kind of went through that entrepreneurial poverty that many entrepreneurs I'm sure can relate to, where you invest, but you're kind of always a bit broke, and you're doing it on a shoestring budget and so on. And I thought, gosh, it doesn't have to be like that. And if someone had coached me to say, actually, well, if you do this before you do that, and and so on and so forth, you can take a pound out for yourself as well. And I thought, well, okay, I can do that for others. And so that's something that really switches me on, gets me out of bed in the morning. And so I really enjoy helping other people build businesses. And that's something that fundamentally I really love to do because I've seen the pain. I felt the pain. In fact, I was with a franchisee of mine the other day, and I was saying, oh, you should do such and such. And he said, oh, I'm not ready yet. And I said, great, I'll come back in 6 months when you're in more pain, you'll do it. And he was laughing as you can't say that. And I said, well, it's the truth, right? I've been there myself. So I really get it.
I can relate to that on many levels, but on the coaching level of helping business owners start their own businesses and helping them get out of a lot of the traps that you've mentioned or allude to there, it's like it's such a rewarding thing to do as well. And I remember leaving medicine and thinking, will I ever find a career that will give me that same level of satisfaction and reward that actually helping people in their direst situation would be? And actually, when you change people's lives, the business owners, and give them freedom back and give them the profit to actually
Yeah.
enjoy the work they're doing, I mean, that is life changing for people. But you're also doing it in providing home care and providing that people who are in desperate need, and like you said, you may not want, or most 99% of people I've ever known in home care don't want home care, but they
No,
need.
that's so true. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
delivering that in a respectful way, and a way that listens to culture and listens to the individual's needs, like that's amazing. So yeah, you've hit a sweet spot with regards to actually having a rewarding business. So well done to you.
Thank you.
Cool. So I think this leads really nicely into digging into the franchise aspect of what you do, because Having read the E-Myth by Michael Gerber many years ago, and actually that was really one of the real turning points for me for trying to turn my businesses from complete chaos and be me being the everything in the business to thinking actually if I can just create a system around what I do, then other people can do it for me. And obviously that book, if you've not read it, I recommend anyone listening to this to read that book as a go-to reference for just how to actually get the mindset of creating an efficient business. But what you did is take that literally and actually create the franchise model. So let's dig into that. Like, what is it about the franchise model, other than you were like you mentioned for your coaching and helping people? What is it about that that you feel is makes it the way to go, and why we as all business owners that should or shouldn't, depending on your opinion, be looking at that model, whether or not we choose franchise in the future or not?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the fact that it's scalable and replicatable is really important. So when you're selling a franchise, you're really selling a system. You're selling a brand, you're selling a culture, but you're really selling a system. And it's a system that will work for you, or work for me, or work for the person next door. But what that requires is it requires a person that you're selling the system to be someone that is teachable, that will work within that system and be interested in that. If you've immediately got someone that's going rogue, well, then you're not going to have the Big Mac. You're going to have Big Mac with pineapple in it or whatever it might be. So it's really sort of understanding it's a kind of two-way street. As a franchisor, you can create a system that works and test it and road test it and keep kind of trying to break it to see how you make it tighter and better. But as a franchisee, you really need to follow the model. And I think, I was with Scott Greenberg not that long ago, and he's written a book called The Wealthy Franchisee. And fundamentally, it is a wealthy franchisee is someone that actually follows the system. And as you grow and get bigger, great, you can start talking about it, and you can dig in and look at how you improve that system. But fundamentally, getting from that zero to a million or two just to make it a decent quality business, sustainable, and something that delivers EBITDA to you, I think do that first, then try to improve it, because those first couple of years are just all too crucial to stay alive and keep growing. So I'd say that's the kind of first part of it that I really sort of understood the importance of developing a system and growing a system. And the other part of it is that well, it works, right? I mean, it's really something that if somebody follows a model, it will work. And actually, I was with a friend of mine today who's looking at starting a business, and I said, look, just grab a coffee and let's talk this out, and do a bit of kind of action coaching there. And it's really just sort of saying, well, okay, well, I have no idea about your sector, but if I was going to do it, this is what I would do. And really what you realize is that the fundamentals are the same whether you're selling pastoral care, and it's fundamentally these are the steps that kind of go into the back office bit. Or, for example, I have just made an acquisition, and I was at this site yesterday, and it's not a site that I can get to very often. It's far away and so on. But it's really going in and saying, right, okay, who have we got? What sort of restructure do we need? Here are the roles that need to be filled. Here are the things that, each person needs to be accountable for. And if we can do that, we know that it will at very least kind of be steady, but probably start to increase pretty quickly and become a better quality, bigger, more sustainable business as a result of that. And so I think running a franchise model is where you can see a collection of systems working across multiple different units. And then you can always, as a franchisor, you're sort of saying, oh, great, what's Steve up to? Okay, let me see if I can implement that bit into Amrit's business over there. And let's test that out in 10 other locations. Super duper, this really works. Let's roll, and let's push that out. And, we've road tested it. It works. We've spent the expensive time, effort, money road testing something, and then we're able to roll that out and allow the scale to happen there.
Yeah, that's cool. Just thinking how fantastic it would be to have that not only just the ability to test things quickly in inverted commas, but like having a market there ready to actually test ideas too, but also to then influence and help all of your franchisees with the result of that. Like that's such a rewarding and yeah, awesome path to go down. Or awesome thing to be able to do, I should say. Um, as you're speaking then, I was just thinking about like when you started this business, I think you mentioned this before, was did you start this business as a franchise model or the second time around, I mean, was that
Yes,
the way
yeah,
you
well,
went into it? Yeah.
yeah.
And
I
what was the reason for doing it that way rather than building the biggest, home care network in the UK? Why did you choose the franchise route above you just making your own big business?
Yeah, I mean, also, if I look back at the last 5 years, if I'd run my own business, it doesn't even have to be particularly big, but I would have made more money doing that. But I've made more impact doing this. And so that was really important to me, making more impact. So, getting into more, we largely take care of more elderly people. So, really getting in front of more elderly people, impacting more care workers and more entrepreneurs, that really was important to me. But also from a scale perspective, I think often what will happen is that if you do want to go multi-site, now you can actually do really well just at one site, frankly, one or two sites. But if you did want to go multi-site, then the thing that slows the growth down is actually money. And so unless you go heavily leveraged or you get business partners or you get private equity support or whatever it might be, but that makes the whole thing much less fun, frankly. And so franchising is a really interesting route to growing your brand through, and it's a great way to sort of finance that growth. And so I think that's a really interesting way to look at that. Obviously, the pie shrinks, but the impact massively increases. So I think that's a really important thing. If you're interested in sort of impact investing, for example, I think franchising is a great way to do that. If I think about what we're up to with social care, we're able to really, in many ways, do a version of that ourselves here. So I'm particularly keen on that, and I'm particularly sort of in love with the franchising model. And you don't always get it right, and there's always going to be issues along the way. But what you're able to achieve through the power of franchising, I think, is actually quite phenomenal.
Yeah, I love that. That idea of, especially with something as important as elderly care, which it touches everybody in some way, shape, or form, whether it's our grandparents, parents, ourselves, or in future our kids and beyond. We, if we're very lucky, then maybe not, but
Yeah.
the vast majority of us will, in some way, shape, or form, be involved in that. So if you can make an impact on that and actually be able to stand against the big players and actually say, look, we've tested this works really well. Look, we can actually, or just by example, fantastic. So yeah, I love it. Never looked at franchise from that perspective before. So I really like that.
Thank you.
Cool. And so tell me a bit more about the business itself, because I'm sure there are things that we, as I mentioned, like we're all getting older, whether we like it or not. And so maybe like where do you like to, or what are your passions around working in the sector that have then spilled out into maybe other areas of your life, or how you try to educate people about how to live better lives, or I can only imagine this is part of of why you do what you do. So I'd be really interested to learn about it.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. It's kind of the other way around for me.
Okay.
My life has spilled into my business, and but it in a really positive way. So I've always been quite active, and interested in things like well-being and longevity, and I used to be a competitive weightlifter, and so on. But last year we went through a rebrand, which basically kind of morphed us into much more of a well-being brand for older people because no one's really talking about that. No one's really talking about longevity for older people. wellness for older people, not of this kind of age group and dynamic. And so I really started thinking about that, and actually we've kind of morphed into this concept that we call time to thrive. And my new book is sort of named after this old concept, whereas that's time to thrive, the home care revolution. But within Walfinch, our concept is time to thrive, and it's about getting older is not just about surviving; it's about thriving. And how do we help you do that? And we've got Thrive clubs around the country where older people can drop in free of charge, donation-based classes that allow them to do exercise classes, PT, yoga, art classes. So it helps emit that loneliness, but also actively helps promote wellness and maybe even build muscle mass and so on. And I think really I've really thought about that, and I've thought about how can we educate older people, and when I say older people, I really mean anyone over the age of like 40 to really focus and think about building muscle mass and thinking, well, what do I want to be able to do in my 80s and 90s? And if I know that there's going to be a certain level of muscle deterioration, how much more muscle mass do I need to gain today to allow for that kind of balance so that I can pick my grandkids up, I can tie my shoelaces, play golf, whatever it might be.
Yeah. I just saying that. I mean, I'm 45, and this is incredibly, what's the word? Close to home because I
Yeah.
know that I've in my past been a ultra marathon runner, and done a lot of exercise. But actually, of late, after a couple of injuries, I haven't been focusing on my strength. I'm still pretty fit, but actually, and I know, like I was a doctor for God's sake, I know this stuff. But hearing you actually say it is incredibly powerful because it's like this is the stuff that if we don't actually do something about it now, when being in your 40s, you can still build muscle and you can still get stronger and make a huge difference to exactly like you said, what the future you will be able to do
Yeah.
in the simple stuff, like and keeping yourself, like doing yourself out of work here, but keeping yourself out of a care home. That's
Absolutely. Yeah.
ultimately
Yeah.
what we want as people. And so yeah, I'm inspired by you mentioned this, but also I love what you're doing, like with regards to the um, time to thrive. Was it? Did you say?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. And actually giving people not only a place to connect and but build a network, but also actually do something that's that's making them live longer, but healthier and more enjoyable lives. So that's amazing.
And I think that's it. I think really a lot of it comes down to just rebranding, getting older. It's okay
Yeah.
with doing it, hopefully, right? And actually, it's then just thinking, well, how do I want to live? And really, when I think about it, I think about my parents, my dad, for example, who's pretty active and in his 70s right now. But if he fast forwards 10 years, he still wants to be going on holiday, having a whiskey every night, hitting the gym and going out with his friends and all of that kind of thing. And you think, well, is what is being served to people right now, is that appropriate? And I don't think it is, which is really why we thought, well, let's just change it. Home care really hasn't changed in the last 20 years in the UK. Well, now it has.
Fantastic. How do you see then the future for Walfinch and what's next?
Yeah, and that's a great question, one that really excites me. But I think, in the UK we've got the capacity to build about 200 sites, so we like to do that in the next 10 years and plant a few flags internationally in the next 5 or 6 years, really. So, and we're sort of on that journey. I spend a lot of time with the international franchise market as well, just kind of learning and observing and building those relationships.
Oh, fantastic. What do you see developing then in over that time period? Like, how do you see home care actually changing for the better? And what big challenges do you think you're going to be facing and hopefully overcoming in that time?
I think, by the time this comes out, I think one of the big challenges that will be immediately upon us is the new budget. So there's, fiscal issues that we have with all of the changes there. But I think over the longer period, I think the long term will mean that there is a shift in how home care is provided in the UK. And I think will be much more of that kind of American model where it's home health care because, the hospitals can't cope with the level that is of patients going in. So I think we'll be providing a lot more of that at home, which is starting to happen, but is maybe 10% of the market at the moment or less. But I would say that that will be probably the biggest gear shift change over the next decade or so, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
I mean, that was even happening when I was in healthcare. I came out of medicine in 2015. So even back then, it was like that's what they were talking about. So maybe they'll eventually get around and do it.
Yeah.
Things work slowly in the NHS.
We a needs must situation as it always is with us. So
Yeah, definitely. Um, I want to finish on a really positive note. This has been a very interesting and thought-provoking interview, and I really appreciate it. And I'd love to finish on like a success story from your franchise, one of your franchisees, that really, if you can think of one that actually really explains like why someone should think about becoming a franchisee. And I'll tell you that there's a bit of a personal edge to this, is because I came out of medicine in 2015, as I just said, and I didn't know what the hell I was going to do. Like I had a few property and they sort of ticked over, but I emigrated to Sweden. And so I didn't I didn't have the network here that I had in the UK to start, building out properties here immediately, etc. Didn't have the finance to do it either. And so I was looking at lots of different business models, and actually even went to a Subway franchisee meetup to just to actually understand what the hell this franchise thing's all about. And I looked at a few other franchises, and I was I think for me, I felt, and there's a lot of, I think, people coming into business. If you're like listening to this and you're thinking of starting a business, or you're in the early days, you're not sure, like I was then, like which path should I go, whether it's to become a franchise or be a franchisee. And I think there's a lot of fear unknown about being so restricted, and not really having your own business. You're running it's almost like having a boss. That's what it I presume that's not the case, but that's what it felt like to me at the time. So, do you have a case study? This is a long question, but do you have like a case study, a success story that could, put all those fears or those thoughts
debunk
about
it.
it to bed?
Yeah, I think there's heaps of stories, but the one that really springs to mind immediately is of Sarah Wickham. So she's our franchisee out in Suffolk, and she was my first franchisee actually, and so we kind of took a leap of faith on each other, and it was December 2019. And I thought, God, my wife had said to me, "Well, who the hell's going to buy your first franchise?" And I'm thinking, oh, I don't know, someone, I hope. And along comes Sarah. We were connected to each other by a mutual contact, and really nice chap, and he'd put us in touch. And this kind of meeting, and I hadn't really finessed or had any idea of how to run this meeting, but it went from, this coffee meetup to drinks in her kitchen in Suffolk, and me missing a train to London in the middle of the night and freezing my backside off at one of these East Anglia stations. But she signed up, and we built this system that I knew would work and operated because I'd been running businesses in the sector for so long already. But from her side, she was someone that had always wanted to run her own business, but she'd been sort of an employee, and quite a kind of a key employee, an operational, sort of director level person within the space actually. And but she'd been on that kind of, the standard kind of piece with jobs that's, you tick along and you're on the 10% a year ride, and all of that. But she's gone from that to being a multi-unit franchisee, having broken all records for us, and actually probably most people in the UK within franchise space within home care. She's got 3 units. She'll do 4.5 million, maybe 4 million this year of top line revenue across these units. She employs over 100 care workers, and she's just changed her life. she's not only just changed her life, but she's changed the lives of all of those care workers because she really gets it and she feels their pain. She's changed the lives of, the clients and their families because she understands service and she's doing it, in a hyper personal way for herself. But she's also changed her life and the life of her, her unit because she's able to now, do all the things that she's always wanted to because she's got that financial freedom and systems in play for a business to carry on in the interim as well. So that really always jumps out at me as being a really emotional moment for me, but also just such a positive news story every year. Year on year, she's just carried on and just not stopping, just continued growing.
Fantastic. Awesome, awesome story. I just want to pick up on one thing you said there, because me being a bit of a lover of systems, this is the Systemize Your Success podcast, of course. And like one thing you mentioned now is about having the systems in place. And I think that for me, like now knowing what I know and knowing, having coached hundreds of business owners now on building their own systems within their business and develop frameworks and methodologies all around it, like seeing and knowing firsthand, but also seeing how much effort goes into creating efficient systems that are reliable and reproducible and scalable. Like the idea now of being able to go to someone saying, "Hey, will you just give me all of that for free?" Not for free, but obviously for a fee, but free for time. I mean, but you just give me all of that. It's almost like a get out of jail free card. It's like, or no, it's more like an
Yeah.
advance to go.
It's
It's
an
a
advantage, no, for sure. Yeah.
yeah, it's like, wow, what a massive, massive step like out of the trenches,
Yeah.
without, having to really do anything except for commit, time and energy and passion, obviously. And I'm sure it's just as hard running a franchise as any other type of business, but with that no knowledge that you've got, like all of that hard work, you've done all that hard work for them, and continue to help them develop like their systems going forward. I think it's just, as I say, knowing what I know now, I kind of wish I'd done it. No.
Hey,
I love what I do. I'm a systems guy.
there's
I
only
want to build my
tomorrow,
own
right?
franchise thing.
Yeah, there's no stopping you.
Absolutely. Oh, this has been great, Amrit. Thank you so much for coming on. I do have a couple of quick questions for you before you go. Like to ask everybody a couple of questions. Firstly, I'm a big lover of apps and technology and all gadgets and all the rest of it. But what are the couple of browser plugins, apps, tools, gadgets that you love and couldn't live without at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, it's all basic stuff. I mean, I actually run most of my life off my phone. Actually, I run meetings off it. I'm out and about all the time. So I think, my phone, my AirPods and so on are just kind of a lifeline. Without that, I couldn't actually run my business in the way that I do, which is really kind of on the move and so on. So it's basic, but actually it's crucial. In terms of apps, I kind of live off my calendar. So things like Calendly, and so on. I mean, that's really quite cool. I've started mucking around a bit with AI as well, and so I'm sort of into Perplexity and ChatGPT, and kind of that helps me with some cheat codes throughout my day in life. And I think if I really hone it down, it's probably those couple of things. But actually you always want to kind of come on and answer these questions with something that no one's ever heard of. But actually, if I'm really honest, I'm super basic because I think the simple stuff is really where the roadblocks are, and often we forget about that. So literally, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine today and explaining how I break my day down into 30-minute chunks. So, my calendar, for example, is just crucial. And whenever I can be bothered to wear it, my Apple Watch as well, which helps me with keeping the whole thing rolling. So, but I'm a bit of an Apple fiend. So yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's a brilliant answer. I don't think you have to come up with something revolutionary to make it very valuable, because I even have an entire training purely on how to use Google Cal or any cal how to use a calendar more efficiently. But and it's one of the my most like when I share that with clients, they're like, "This is brilliant."
Yeah.
It's just, and I'm
Yeah.
just like, yeah, but it's just blocking out time. It's like I've got done podcasts on this and all sorts, and it's like simple stuff is sometimes makes the biggest breakthrough. So no, I'm all with you on this. No need to elaborate any further. Brilliant. And my last question is, as this is Systemize Your Success, what does success mean to you and why?
I think success to me is really, here is my 90-day goal, 1 year goal, 3 year goal, 10-year goal, and have I reached it? And it doesn't necessarily have to be financial. Those goals might be, how much time I'm spending at home and doing bath time with my kids. It's really about what is important to you. To understand whether you're successful, you need to have an aim in the first place. And if that is revenue, great. It might not be. It might be span. It might be time spent. It might be whatever it is. So for me, it's really comes back down to what am I setting out to do and why?
Fantastic. Good answer. Before you go, two things. One is tell us the name of your book again and when it comes out. And the second is how can people get in contact with you if they want to?
No, great. So my book is called Time to Thrive, The Home Care Revolution. And you can type that into Amazon and and receive a copy, I think, the next day. And the best way to get a hold of me is LinkedIn, Amrit Dhaliwal, Instagram, Amrit_Walfinch, YouTube, Amrit the Walking CEO with all, I think they're all either underscores or hyphens, and our website, walfinchfranchising.com.
Perfect. And as always, we'll put all of those things and more in the show notes on our website, systemizeyoursuccess.com. Cool. Thank you very much indeed. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Pleasure's all mine. Thank you. Cheers.